Today we'll discuss another hypothetical GTA game, and this one is one that fans have wanted for years and years, and that's a stories prequel type thing for GTA San Andreas. Now I won't go into why we never got it because that's been discussed a lot on YouTube over the last few years, but rather I'll go into what and who this game would be about. So firstly, let's look at the time and place of this game. So this game would be set in maybe the early to mid 1980s, roughly around the time when Sweet took over leadership of Grove Street Families. Now, while it's unclear when exactly he took over the leadership, I think it's sometime before Brian's death, so it could have been, let's say 1984, maybe 1985, maybe even a couple years before that. And while it's not, like I said, 100% clear, let's just go for that assumption. Speaking of Sweet, he would be our main protagonist for this game, and the story would probably start at the same time as his leadership, and it would focus on Sweet making the gang more influential, more powerful. And while the gang would initially at least be concentrated around the Ganton area mainly, just like in the original, a huge focus of this game would be, at least in the latter parts, revolving around sort of this first union of Grove Street families, Seville Boulevard families, and Temple Drive families, which, I mean, yeah, by the time GTA San Andreas starts, they're all enemies again, but they're just uniting for a first time in this time frame. However, before we get to that, the focus of this first part of the game, in my mind, would be about Sweet, Ryder, and Big Smoke. Mainly Ryder and Big Smoke, as we would for a few missions, which would probably take place over a few month period to maybe a year, but we would mainly follow Big Smoke, Sweet, and Ryder throughout their adventures rising up the Grove Street family's ranks, or mainly Ryder and Big Smoke, as Sweet's probably at this point already the leader, like I said, but we would definitely see how Big Smoke and Ryder got to the high-ranking positions that they were in at the time of GTA San Andreas. Of course, we would also have occasional appearances by CJ and later on maybe even little Brian, but we'll get to Brian a little bit later. Real quick though, if you're enjoying this video so far, please do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, also check out my second channel, that's where the Kingdom Hearts content is, as well as my channel memberships. All of that is going to be down in the description below. The first portion of the game would also be an amazing opportunity for us to learn about the characters' backstories and get answers to how they all met, how they grew up, what kind of shit they did together, which would not only flesh out all the characters more, but would also give a lot more weight and impact to Big Smoke and Ryder's betrayal after the idea of how close all these guys were was even further cemented into the player's brain. As for the second portion of the game, this would focus on Sweet and the group not only making Grove Street families stronger, but also I think a strong emphasis could be put on the first time that all of the family sets united, like I said, those being Grove Street families, Seville Boulevard families, and Temple Drive families. This would allow for further development for some side characters too. The best examples of this are certainly Big Bear, Beat Up, and Emmett, whose stories I always felt had a little bit more potential. Just imagine seeing more of Emmett, or seeing Big Bear before the drugs ruined him, or even Beat Up before the drug money corrupted him and he went to the ballas side. All of these would make for very interesting storylines, but now it's time to discuss the elephant in the room, and that is of course Brian Johnson, who is arguably the biggest GTA San Andreas mystery just on his own, but we know that he is a big part of GTA San Andreas' story. But what would be his role in this game? Well, it's the general consensus in the community that Brian Johnson was born around 1977, making it highly unlikely that we'd see him doing crazy shit like drive-bys around Ganton and whatnot. With that said, however, I do think that he'd be somewhat of a lookout for the gang. Someone who could go around the neighborhoods kind of under the radar and inform the rest of the GSF members about any kind of ballas ambush, which, to add, they would also probably be a very common thing in this game. One could even call them a staple. We know that CJ was a lot closer with Brian than he was ever with Sweet, likely meaning that we would see a lot of scenes with CJ and Brian together, messing around and being goofballs, which would in my opinion be an opportunity to also give CJ as a character a little bit more depth and give him more of a funny slash goofy side, which was kind of present in GTA San Andreas, but I think it would come to light a bit more here. And while we're on the topic of CJ's family life, we could potentially see some scenes with CJ's mother, who in all honesty I don't even know what she would be like, but I imagine she wouldn't really be all too happy with how how her sons, especially Sweet, was living. And maybe we could see some mention of CJ's dad, but we do know that pretty much none of the Johnson kids knew their dad very well, so who knows, maybe we could get a few mentions of him here and there. Now it's time to talk about the big event of this game and the ending of this game as well. So firstly, let's get the sort of final mission out of the way. Let's say that Sweet, Ryder, and Big Smoke would plan an assassination or an ambush on a high-ranking Bala member who has been ever since the beginning of the game causing various problems for Grove Street families, whether it's killing their members or sabotaging them in any possible way that they can. Now, the hit would initially be successful and the story would be seemingly over. We would then see one final scene with CJ and Brian one night in 1987 causing trouble around Idlewood, and CJ would be teaching Brian how to spray paint Grove Street graffiti over a Bala's one. But while their attention would be on the spray painting, they wouldn't notice a group of 7 heavily armed Bala's members right behind them, and by the time they try to make a run for it, it would be too late to say the least, as one of them would shoot Brian, leaving him fatally wounded, and CJ would be in a panicked state, and he'd then make a run for it to try to make it out of there with his life, and he would just barely make it to Ganton territory, and this scene would act as a bridge between GTA San Andreas stories and GTA San Andreas. As we know, after this, CJ and Sweet fall out, with Sweet blaming CJ for Brian's death, and CJ, being guilt-ridden himself, would then of course decide to go for a fresh start on the East Coast in Liberty City. And with that said, I want to thank you for watching this video. Leave your thoughts and opinions on this topic and on this video in the comments down below. Until the next video stream, bye bye.